Everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. My guest today is Brian Hart. He is the executive director of the Esselstyn Foundation, and he is going to teach us how we can get the men we love off of meat. Please welcome Brian to the show. How are you?
All right, great. Thanks for having me on, AJ.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. In case people don't know, who are you? Who are you?
I guess my claim to fame is I'm married to Jane Esselstyn. And so in the plant-based world,
you mean this Jane Esselstyn, who wrote the New York Times best-selling Be a Plant-Based Woman Warrior?
Exactly. And Anne and Jane both wanted to be able to pop their heads into this interview and say hi, but they are actually presenting at a local bookstore here in Cleveland, Ohio, and they are talking about their new book. So thanks for holding it up. Be a Plant-Based Woman Warrior.
It's not only a terrific book, based on just the recipes, but the photography, it's like so beautiful.
It is. It's gorgeous. We have a local photographer that we stumbled upon through, she actually worked for Edible Cleveland, which is a magazine in Cleveland, and we found her through that, and she is just fantastic.
I mean, look at you just want to eat the page. It's beautiful.
Exactly.
So tell me a little bit about yourself before you do the presentation. Your father and mother-in-law, they're plant-based royalty to a lot of us.
That's right. I married into plant-based royalty. I've been a vegetarian of some version for 25 years. And when I met Jane, we were working as Outward Bound instructors. And I think we connected because we were both plant-based, but of course I wasn't plant-based like the Esselstyns. I was a vegetarian, kind of a junk food vegetarian. And over time, of course, Jane wore me down, and now I'm a whole food plant-based, of course, no oil. And so that's how I met Jane. And we were Outward Bound instructors, like I said. And so we were working in the mountains and the woods of North Carolina. And we were both trying to eat as healthily as we can, which can be really challenging when you're in the woods with a bunch of kids, trying to get by and eat. But so we got married, and fast forward, we have three kids, three plant-based kids. Most of my career was spent as a teacher and an educator. I was a middle school teacher, then a middle school principal for 5 years. And then I got a little burned out on that, and I decided that I wanted to get into the plant-based realm. And so we started the Esselstyn Foundation about 4.5 years ago. And I can talk more about the Esselstyn Foundation if you want.
I would love to, but first I want to know, you raised all three of your kids plant-based from birth?
We did. I have to say, so our rules were no milk, no meat. We did kind of allow cheese pizza to come in and out of the house occasionally. Like, we weren't militant. We really were trying to be careful about making food kind of a war zone with our kids, and setting them up for how difficult it would be to be outside the home and go to friends' houses and things. But of course, in hindsight, we could have easily done it, because now all three of our kids are totally whole food plant-based. They don't eat dairy products now, but we sort of were a little more flexible on cheese, which, we could debate that all day, but that was our choice at the time. But of course, looking back on it, I think we could have done a better job.
Yeah. But it's interesting because your whole family, the whole family, all the Esselstyn grandchildren and children are plant-based, right? There's not like a single one that went rogue.
That's right. You're absolutely right. Of course, they all have had moments of dabbling in different things, but never did they sort of go, completely reject everything and become meat eaters. I think junk food, vegan, probably a lot of them have dabbled with at times. And that's easy to do, obviously, when you're young and under the warranty and you're still eating pretty healthily, but the oils kind of creep in and things like that. But overall, all 10 grandchildren are plant-based, which is amazing.
That really is unbelievable. So that must make family gatherings pretty easy.
It does. We don't have a lot of politics around food at all. It's pretty much an agreement that we're all going to eat the same way. For instance, on Christmas Eve, we have a big beans and rice festival. That's kind of our big thing on Christmas Eve. People always ask us, well, what do you eat for the holidays? Well, we actually eat pretty much what we always eat, which is a lot of legumes, a lot of veggies.
That's funny. I hear that you're an incredible cook. I hear that from Anne. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm a pretty good cook. So when I worked at Outward Bound, I don't know if you know much about like outdoor education, but a lot of times it's a really out of balance lifestyle. You're working in the field as an instructor, and you'll be out in the woods for 30 days. You come back for 4 days, and then you're out in the woods for 30 days. And so in order to get a little more balance in my life, I decided to at times cook in the kitchen there at Outward Bound, which is, you're feeding the year-round staff and all that stuff. So I ran what would be called I would say, heavily vegetarian kitchen. That's where I learned to cook under a woman who had gone to cooking school. And so I was trained as a cook, and that's how I learned how to cook. And that was back in like the Moosewood days. I'm sure you remember the Moosewood cookbooks and all those.
I think I still have it, actually.
Yeah. All the Molly Katzen's stuff I loved. And so again, not super healthy all the time. She was pretty heavy on cheese back in those days. But I think since then she's sort of pushed more towards moving away from cheese and things like that. Have you ever been to the Moosewood restaurant?
I haven't. Is it still in existence? And where
is it? Jane and her friend recently were passing through near Cornell University. I can't think of the Ithaca, New York, and that's where it is, and it's still in business.
I was just, as I mentioned to you before we logged on, I just put my books in alphabetical order, and I just came across one of her other books called Vegetable Haven or Vegetable Haven.
Yeah. I mean, she's the original gangster in this sense. I mean, she was, other than like, I think of like Frances Moore Lapp and Ocean Robbins' father is
John Robbins.
John Robbins, and his book on Diet for a New America.
Yeah.
And some of those books that I was reading early on that got me into being plant-based. And so all the Katzen books were amazing.
When you were a principal, like the school that you were a principal or a teacher for, like, did they have lunch programs where they were making the lunches, or did the kids?
Oh yeah. Probably one of the most political committees to ever serve on was the cafeteria committee. And because, as you know, food is a war zone when you start talking about what kids should eat. I mean, I have my ideas of what kids should eat to be healthy. And then you've got cafeteria food service and how that's dealt with, and the idea of trying to keep everyone happy. Lots of, I think, really unhealthy meals. We did have a really amazing salad bar. That was a game changer, and in many ways, it saved those of us who were trying to eat healthily. Was just to have a really pretty substantial salad bar, but otherwise, most of the meals were pretty bad.
Isn't it true that like these companies, like they give money like for like team uniforms or something, so you'll put like a Coca-Cola sign and isn't that true that the companies do that with schools?
They do. Luckily, I worked in private education, so there was not any of that. Whereas in, I think, a lot of cases in public schools where they're in situations where they're really trying to pinch every penny, and sometimes they have to deal with putting soda machines in. We really tried to keep that stuff out of our school, and we were able to because we were a private school.
I mean, I'm so old. I remember going to school before there was soda in school. Like they didn't have it. That was like it just didn't exist.
Yeah, but of course, what's so interesting is a lot of times they used to have this snack cart after school that would sell all kinds of different things to make money for the parent fund or something like that. And it was always just so much junk. But I mean, and a lot of kids were drinking these flavored iced teas, which of course is not soda. So you could argue, oh, it's healthier, but it's really not. It's the same stuff. It's just a lot of sugar. And
I remember when I moved to California from Chicago in 1971 to go to Millikan, a junior high school, 7th grade, they'd have this thing called nutrition. It was like between breakfast and lunch. I think it was like 10 o'clock. And for 5 cents, you could buy a piece of coffee cake or spice cake. I'm not kidding you. It was big. It was it was huge. And I remember years later, they published the recipe in the LA Times because like this was a delicious cake. I mean, and basically the first ingredient I think was oil, flour, sugar, powdered sugar. There was a little bit of cinnamon in there. And I'm thinking, oh my, I mean, like the thing was so calorically, it was just incredible. And like, this was what we were given for nutrition break,
Oh yeah.
like this huge piece of cake.
School lunches are just tragic if you really think about it, especially when I was, after I was principal, I did a little educational consulting for a few years before I started the Esselstyn Foundation. So for like 3 years, I dabbled in some consulting work, and I did some consulting work down in some really impoverished schools in West Virginia. And it was shocking what was being fed. You know, none of the people in the cafeterias were cooking anything. All they were doing was reheating frozen chicken nuggets or chicken fingers. And oh, it was brutal. It was so brutal.
Is this true, Brian? Maybe, I think I heard it from that organization in New York that's trying to get healthier offerings in school, that like they almost make it mandatory for kids to drink milk unless they have a note, and they won't even give them like water or soy milk. It's like they're forcing them to drink milk, which is completely unnatural.
I know it is. Yeah. In some schools, that's still the case. It's like you have to bring in a note to say you don't like milk, or you're lactose intolerant or something.
Oh my God, I feel so bad for kids today. So tell us about the Esselstyn Foundation. When was it founded? Why was it founded? What is its mission? What do you do as the executive director?
Sure. So about 3.5, 4 years ago, well, 4.5, I guess, we started with the idea that then led to going through the motions of all trying to register as a nonprofit and all that stuff. But we decided and we realized that there is an absolute need out there because, a lot of people can't afford to access this plant-based information. And that can mean anything from having an internet connection, a really good one, or to going away to an immersion. And as you know, the plant-based movement, a lot of people see it as relegated to like the world of Whole Foods. You have to shop organic. You have to, it's expensive to buy these foods. And so we really decided that we wanted to create an organization in which we would give away all of our programming free of charge. And we would be able to partner with existing nonprofits to be able to get this message out to as many people as we could. So we partner with schools and community organizations and hospitals, and we work with a lot of medical students. And we say, if you can fill the room, we will talk about plant-based eating with you. And so we have kind of our core 4 presentations we do. We moved to all virtual during the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, we were traveling to different places and speaking. And what we realized, of course, as you've clearly realized, is that virtual is amazing. You can reach so many people, so many more people. And now we're reaching thousands and thousands of people a year with our presentations. And it's because we've moved to virtual, and it just makes it easier on everybody. And not to mention, Ann and Essie, Dr. Esselstyn and Ann being in their mid to late 80s, they are not really interested in traveling far away and having to speak to large groups in large areas where there's lots of COVID flying around. And so it's really kind of worked out for us really well. So like I said, we have right now I'm working on a partnership with some people in the Environmental Protection Association, actually, that want to do an internal wellness program. So that kind of thing, if you're a nonprofit, you can partner with us and we'll give you all the programming for free.
That's incredible to know. I hope people will take advantage of that. So what's it like having Ann and Essie as your father and mother-in-law?
It's great. And also our next door neighbors, as you probably recall, we live next door to them.
Wow.
So yeah, we're over there a lot. We see them quite a bit, and it's so interesting. Actually, I just found out today right before Jane and Ann went to do their presentation at the bookstore, I found out that some people were driving from Cincinnati, which is about 4 hours away, to come see them speak. So I do feel like I'm around royalty at times, and it's really funny to be in a grocery store with Ann and have someone come storming up to her and say, "I know you from YouTube."
That's hilarious. I know she's like a reluctant YouTube star, isn't she?
She is. She doesn't like all the attention, but it is funny how now when she and Essie, when they occasionally do present live at a conference or something, they'll walk in and people will charge over to Ann first. They'll like bypass Essie and say, I know you from YouTube. I've watched all your videos.
Oh, that's hilarious. Who is the primary chef in your family on a day-to-day basis, you or Jane?
Oh, I think we go back and forth. We trade off, and our daughter's becoming a pretty good cook as well. Our daughter, Kryle, who's now currently living at home, she has a remote job. She just graduated from college last year, and she's got a remote job. So she's home right now saving money. And so she's getting in on the action. So we trade off a lot, but probably like you, I don't know about you, but even though Jane has written all these cookbooks and everything like that. Generally on a day-to-day basis, we eat pretty simply. Like last night, here's a great example. Last night we had black beans with cornmeal. We've gotten really into polenta. So we're eating polenta, black beans, and a big pile of greens drizzled with some balsamic glaze. Like it doesn't get much simpler than that, you know.
It's like the cobbler's kids always need new shoes. When you write books and recipes, it's like, and then you'd make like a very special holiday, like, oh my God, this is so hard. Who really cooks like this? I agree with you. Simple. Sweet potatoes and broccoli every day for lunch. I just don't even want to think about it.
Yeah, you don't have to think about it. I mean, I always go back to like Adam Sudd, who's probably been on your show before. You know, Adam, when he was in recovery, for those of you who don't know, he was in drug addiction recovery. And he wanted to go plant-based while in recovery. He decided to make it so simple for himself where he didn't have to question what he was going to have for breakfast, lunch, or dinner every day. So he just had the same thing for like 6 months.
Yeah. He's getting married today, actually.
That's right. That's right. I forgot about that. That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
Apparently neither of us were invited, but no, but I'm sure Rip will be there anyway.
Yeah.
So getting the men we love off of meat, why do men they seem more resistant to the plant-based message than women?
Oh, this presentation that I've put together grew out of probably what you can imagine happened to us every time we spoke publicly in any forum. A bunch of women would charge up at the end of the presentation and say, and I quote, "I do this, I'm really into this has changed my life, but my husband won't even consider it." And I hear this so often, we heard it so often. So that's where this presentation came from, is to really look at what's going on with men. And I don't want to spoil the presentation by giving you all the information now, but really, you know, when you survey the number of people who are vegans, who are whole food plant-based, it skews heavily towards women. It's something like, 60% of all vegans are women, and maybe even higher, but it's really interesting to just think about that. And so, what's going on? There's a lot of things possibly going on, but I'll save that for the presentation.
Well, great. Would you like to get started? Well, it's probably just because women are smarter, right? No.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're in many ways, women are smarter. I don't want to say men are dumb, because they certainly aren't. But
not at all.
There is something there's something inherent in women, it seems, because one of my theories is women, as Jane will always remind me, take care of their communities. They're the ones that often get charged with taking care of the people around them. And I think that makes them a little more health conscious. Whereas I think men, and again, I'm talking about some stereotypes here and I'm generalizing, which is always dangerous. I recognize that. But I think men often are much better at thinking about themselves first, and not necessarily taking in the concerns of the community. And I think that sometimes can have something to do with it. But anyway, I'll get to that in the presentation.
Yeah. Well, you would think that just the erectile dysfunction, that would just be enough for them.
Right. Well, I think a lot of men don't know about that fact, and how it is the canary in the coal mine, as we say, right? That's often a sign of a lot of other bigger problems. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing less manly than not being able to perform sexually. So.
Right. That's what I loved about the Game Changers movie. That scene.
I know.
Epic scene.
Yeah.
I think there's something in the culture that you're not manly if you don't eat meat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, this is an interactive lecture. So I know that you'll have to read to me some of the responses. I'm going to ask people to pop some things into the chat box.
Oh, I absolutely be happy to do that. I'll have to put my glasses on, but I'm happy to do that.
Oh, all right. Thanks.
Sure. Well, anytime you're ready. What are you drinking? Iced tea?
I'm drinking a little apple cinnamon tea.
Yum. Hot or cold?
Hot.
Hot.
Yeah, it's
wow.
cold. It's cold here.
It's cold here now. I live in Northern California. It's 32 degrees. It's like
it's about 32 degrees here too.
I think I would have stayed in the desert if I had known it was going to be this cold and raining. Anyway, I can't wait to see your presentation.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Perfect.
How's that look? Okay.
Perfect.
All right. So just a reminder again, we're the Esselstyn Foundation. We are a public charity that promotes plant-based nutrition. We seek to prevent and reverse lifestyle-related diseases through the promotion of whole food plant-based nutrition. Like I said, we're publicly funded. So if for some reason you're interested in learning more about how you can support our work, or you're just interested in what we have to say, you can go to our website, which is www.esselstynfamilyfoundation.org. All right. So getting the men we love off of meat. I'm calling it a collaborative conversation because I'm going to ask people to chime into the chat box and help us sort of sort through some of this. Like I said a moment ago, this presentation really grew out of being bombarded at the end of presentations by a number of women who would quickly tell us that their partners had no interest in going plant-based, even though they were heavily into it, and they were having to cook 2 meals, and maybe they had a son who was not really into it and just refused. And so they had to cook multiple meals in their homes. And so I started doing a lot of research, and actually some of this presentation was actually, I think, made stronger by my daughter, who wrote a paper in college. She was an anthropology major in college, and she wrote a paper about men and meat, and it was part of kind of a sociology anthropology class, looking at sort of anthropologically, do we need meat in our lives and all that stuff. And so part of the information I have for this presentation came from her writing that paper, which is really cool. So first off, I want to make a general statement about gender. I recognize there's people probably out there that are going, hey, wait a minute. Hey, wait a minute. You know, why is it about men and not other people? Well, okay. So I want to make sure I say that our understanding these days of gender is complex and nuanced. It continues to evolve. So today's discussion involves what we might call behaviors that are traditionally male or stereotypically male. I fully recognize that. So, so I want to make sure everyone knows that I know that, and that, again, we're really, anything we talk about today can be applied to anybody who's just not interested in making healthier food choices, male, female, or whatever, however you identify. But again, we're looking at today specifically what we might call traditionally male behaviors. So it's important to note that much of what we discuss is applicable to all humans, no matter their gender identity. All right, so let's discuss for a moment. I want you to think for a moment what memories, and you can jump in the chat box and AJ will read them out to us. What memories do you have of men? Obviously, that could mean yourself or men you know, and their relationship, your relationship to meat preparation and consumption. So what memories do you have from your past that about fathers, grandfathers, brothers, and their relationship to meat preparation and consumption?
While I'm waiting for the chat, I can think of my grandfather. He always had to have the end piece. Yes,
the end piece of the meat, exactly.
Yeah, which was the only one I would eat because I couldn't stand meat or the bloodiness, and at least that one it wasn't red. Ah. Yeah. So these, look what they're saying. Lucia saying, "Dad at the grill, father barbecuing," says Susanna. Cindy, "Mine love to barbecue." Dad undercooking the chicken on the grill, says Paula. Yep. Yep. So yeah, grilling. Grilling, says Deborah. Very manly to grill.
Yeah, probably some hunting comments. That usually comes up, people who have hunters in their family. It is interesting, and it's probably a separate conversation to have, but there is, grilling seems to be an area that men are allowed to be in charge of the cooking, which is very interesting.
Here's another very interesting one from Susanna. Now that I think about it, Dad carving the turkey. It always seemed to be the man that carved the turkey.
Exactly. And that's actually the story that I always share from my family, because in my family, at Thanksgiving, the oldest male in the family carved the turkey. And so that we had this beautiful sort of knife and fork set that was only used on special occasions, and it was always the oldest male in the family would carve.
Wow.
All right. So real men use charcoal, and then when I did a search online of men and grilling, this is what came up. One of the first pictures that came up. And so I always get a chuckle out of this, like, what is it? That just is so interesting. Why is it that men and fire and charcoal and is this this meme in our lives, this sort of cultural acceptance. And so let's step back for a moment and consider some statistics here. So I know I'm preaching to the choir in many cases with many of your viewers and listeners, AJ, but I wanted to make sure that it's really clear. The US ranks highest in meat consumption in the world. We consume about 216 pounds of meat per capita. Australians are a close second. And of course, men eat the most meat, consuming 57% more meat than women, which is, really fascinating. And then a vegan society survey found that 63% of those who identify as vegans are female, while only 37% are male. So, in the vegan world, it is really heavily skewed towards females. And of course, we got to consider some health statistics here. Heart disease is the #1 cause of death for men. Roughly 300,000 males per year are dying of heart disease. Percent of men over age 20 with hypertension is about 30%, a little over 30%, according to the CDC. About 58,000 men die a year of a stroke. 80% of sudden cardiac events occur in men. This is one, those stories you hear about, those stories of someone playing tennis and then they drop dead or they clutch their chest, and that's happening mostly in men, 80%. And men usually develop heart disease 10 to 15 years earlier than women and are much more likely to die of it in the prime of their life. So really the statistics in terms of men's health are pretty grim. I mean, I know they are nationally in terms of everybody, but really for men especially. But of course, should we care about meat? That's always the question. And I know a lot of your listeners and viewers know this already, but Harvard public health study. The study provides clear evidence that regular consumption of red meat contributes substantially to premature death. The Mayo Clinic says that people who eat red meat are at an increased risk of death from heart disease, stroke, diabetes. The EPIC study found that processed meat consumption led to about a 72% increased risk of dying from heart disease and an 11% increased risk of dying from cancer. So meat consumption is linked to these diseases. This is really not a question anymore. And lastly, according to the World Health Organization, a diet high in meat, particularly if it's cooked well done. So to this whole point of grilling, is that it may be associated with an increased risk of developing prostate cancer, the second most common cancer in men. This is due to what we call HCAs, heterocyclic amines, which are carcinogens found in cooked meat. And as you probably know, as many of your viewers probably know, when you grill vegetables, HCAs are not produced. So the heterocyclic amines aren't stimulated by the cooking of vegetables on a grill, but they are if you cook meat on a grill. And so when people who like their meat with a little bit of a singe to it or well done, are putting themselves at a higher risk. So men who are grilling should really be aware, and then add in what's going on with COVID. So according to the CDC, COVID-related complications and/or death is significantly higher in patients with cancer, obesity, heart conditions such as hypertension, coronary artery disease, heart failure, and type 2 diabetes. So again, sort of building the case here for that men should care about the amount of meat that they consume. And so our essential question that we're really trying to answer in this presentation is how can we persuade men, in parentheses, anybody really, but here we're talking about men, to make better food choices, especially regarding their rates of consumption of animal products. So do men require meat? American Dietetic Association, of course, says that vegan and vegetarian diets are healthful, nutritionally adequate, and can provide health benefits in the prevention and treatment of certain diseases. They're appropriate for all individuals at all stages of life, even including pregnancy, lactation, infancy, childhood, adolescence, and for athletes. Of course, the key terms there are appropriately planned, as I know you talk about and we talk about a lot, is making sure people are eating the rainbow, eating lots of different colors of fruits and vegetables to make sure that they're getting everything that they need, that they're, the basis of what they're eating is a lot of legumes and whole grains and all that stuff, and steering clear from all that junk food vegetarian stuff and junk food vegan stuff. So we know men don't need it. So what's the real deal? So why do you think, hop in the chat box and tell me, what do you think's going on with men and meat? What is it with their addiction, if you will, to meat? And why is it that every time you watch a commercial on television that involves people pre-gaming out in the, tailgating, and they're always cooking these huge things of meat, and men are these barbecue masters. So what's going on?
Yeah, people are saying societal hunter-gatherers, like traditionally the men were the hunters.
Uh-huh.
Let's see. It takes a minute sometimes for the chat.
Oh, no problem.
Here's a funny comment from John. Why would primitive man run around all day checking spears at whatever when there's food hanging off the trees right in front of them?
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's see. Meat protein makes you strong. You need lots of it, men
Right.
think, says
There's the
Janice.
belief, right?
Eating meat is macho, says Paula. Gina says meat equates to manliness.
Yeah, but why is that? Is it a domination thing, do you think?
I don't know. Well, the meat industry is pushing it, some people are saying.
Sure, absolutely. The meat industry is pushing it for sure.
Yeah. I mean, your presentation is really making me think, because even though it's not about this, when you think about it, it's slaughterhouses. I don't think there's very many female employees, if there are.
I'm sure. Right. Absolutely. Right.
I mean, I can't say for sure, but I mean, you don't see, and you don't even see a lot of female butchers.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
It's interesting. Yeah.
So interesting. I think we'll get into some fringy stuff in a second, some sort of, some really intense feminist theory that's really fascinating to consider. But I think there's something in there about domination, about dominating your world. But anyway, I don't want to.
Yeah, Tracy's saying, well, fruit doesn't have protein, or at least that's what people think,
Right. All right. So let's jump into some social research here. Social research provides us some really interesting insights. And in some of the cases, I'm going to urge people to really try to be open-minded, because some of the stuff, they're making some broad generalizations, but I think they're really interesting. So according to a study done by Chan and Zlotevsky in 2019, vegetarian men are perceived as up to 35% less masculine than those who follow more standard diets. Men who eat a lot of beef are perceived as 20% more masculine and 30% less feminine than vegetarians, according to a study done by the Journal of Consumer Research. So now we're getting into that weird stuff, like what is that about? Again, Chan and Zlotevsky, when male subjects were given a choice of meat or non-meat options in our study, the greatest demand for meat came from, quote, from those who rated themselves lower in socioeconomic status. Meat was being used as a substitute for the status that they lacked, is what they concluded in their study. So isn't that interesting, that the possibility of choosing meat, especially amongst male friends, is a substitute for some sort of status that they're feeling a little bit sensitive about, that it's used as a status symbol. And according to Rowe and Hurley, many men are interested in eating less meat, but they have a hard time doing so without social permission. Men who took part in a year-long research say they have experienced social isolation among groups of male friends and acquaintances after reducing their intake of animal protein. So once again, here we have a lot of, what the stuff that Doug Lisle talks about in a lot of his presentations, which is, when you're making a better health choice or food choice in front of a group of male peers, this can be really, really difficult. People are going to want to chip away at you and knock you down for a lot of different reasons. Some people think it's because you're holding up a mirror to them and their choices, but there's something threatening about it, and that they can experience social isolation, which seems crazy, right? They're your friends. Why would they be socially isolating you? And according to Charlebois, a refusal to give up meat consumption seems to be linked to masculinity, traditionalism, and hierarchies, all of which resemble and maintain the conventional structures of power in the Western world. So once again, we're talking about the domination of men and the fact that men traditionally, that domination is some sort of the masculine structure and amongst hierarchies. Really interesting. And Gossard concluded that, quote, meat consumption is clearly not the outcome of biological necessity, which we talked about, but a practice embedded within a complex set of social forces. And according to a guy at Edgehill University, meat remains for many men a stable, if arbitrary, hook on which to hang their gender identity, which sounds so pathetic. It makes men seem so silly, but that was the conclusion of Richard Twine. And then there's this. This is where it starts to get really interesting, I think. If you take a look at some interesting advertising, so on the left is a Burger King ad. It'll blow your mind away. And of course, that's quite an interesting setup there with a woman with her mouth open and the sandwich coming in from the right. And then it says it just tastes better. So these are some of the ads that are out there in the world that link men and some sense of masculinity and especially sexual domination. So on the right, that's Paris Hilton. She tells you size doesn't matter. She's lying on a Carl's Jr. ad. And then at the bottom, it says it's going to get messy. And then in the center, my favorite one is this is a ham company in North Carolina. And here they've taken a pig, Lady Edison Ham Company, and they've created this hoofed temptress character where she's wearing these stockings. And again, the mixture of sort of sexuality, male domination, and food all together. This blows me away. So these are the type of images that are being flashed in front of males, especially young males who are watching television or reading magazines. And this is the type of stuff that they're seeing. So of course, it's being reinforced over and over again that to be manly, to be masculine, your sexual prowess is increased, all that stuff. And we all know that that just isn't true. So now let's really stretch our minds a bit. So there's a woman named Carol Adams. She wrote a book called The Sexual Politics of Meat. And according to Adams in her book, meat is a symbol of male dominance. She also states a process of objectification, fragmentation, and consumption connects women and animals in a patriarchal culture. So again, back to that dominance concept. And Dita Shankar writes, the message embedded in the sexualization of meat is that women, like chicken and steak, exist to be salivated over and consumed by men. I know it's tough to kind of, it's out there in terms of its theory, but I think it's really interesting to take this into consideration as men and women. Here's another Carl's Jr. ad. I mean, I don't know how you can get around what they're trying to sell there, but again, the mixing of sexuality, sort of male urges and meat. So let's sum it all up. Vegetarians are seen as less masculine. Meat is possibly a substitute for status. Non-traditional diet choices can often lead to feelings of social isolation for men. It's difficult to obtain social permission to eat plant-based foods. And there are a series of complex social forces at work, and meat consumption is possibly tied to gender identity. So let's discuss some possible solutions. So the question here we're now trying to answer is, how do we get men to make better food choices? How do we navigate our way through all this BS, if you will, and get to the fact that we need men to make better health choices for their health and for their longevity? So here's some wisdom we can share. Strategy number one for working with a recalcitrant male is you need to prepare them to be with their friends and make better choices. So right off the bat, this is, again, right from what Doug Lisle would say, be ready for peer pressure to happen, to exist. If a male in your life, if you're coaching them or you're a male trying to make better food choices, you got to be ready with non-threatening replies for your friends. Things like, I'm trying this for a week to see how it feels. I made a bet with my friend, so I'm going to try to eat more healthily. My doc says it sounds okay, so I'm giving it a try. Or my doc says she wants me to do this for a few weeks. You can see what these statements do is they give you an out. It's not making it seem as if you've now discovered the fountain of youth and you're going to preach it to your friends. You're making it very wishy-washy. I'm trying this for a few weeks, or my doc says it sounds okay, so I'm going to give it a try. This is going to get people off your back and let you alone because you haven't made a choice for life. You're not refuting everything that they do. You're just saying, I'm going to give this a try. So it's non-threatening. Again, straight out of the playbook of Doug Lisle. You don't want to seem as if you're trying to be, as if you show them as if you know more. Strategy number two, you want to leverage the buddy system whenever you can if you're trying to get a man to make a food choice that's in a healthier direction. Get them to partner in crime with whom to collaborate with. It creates social pressure. So make it competitive. Wagers with coworkers work really well. It creates bonds. I've seen I worked at a school years ago where a couple of guys who put on some pounds decided to make a bet to see who could, lose the most weight in the month of January. And it became this whole thing in our school where I was working. And, they would send emails out to everybody and give everyone updates on things. And they bet money, if I remember correctly, or someone would have to take somebody else out to dinner or something like that. That works really well. And in general, having a partner in crime always helps, because you feel like you're responsible to that other person. That always works well in any sort of attempt to make a lifestyle change. It creates social pressure and a sense of responsibility. So leverage the buddy system if you can. Strategy number 3, avoid using the term forever. Start off by talking about a day, a week, a month, a few months with your significant other, the man in your life. The term forever really tends to freak out people, especially men. I'm never going to be able to have meat for the rest of my life. So if that means starting off slowly with maybe a meatless Monday, maybe you try it for a week, you go plant-based for a week. But again, you got to be patient. If he says he needs the taste of meat, maybe eat it once a week, make it the size of a deck of cards. The term forever really scares people. And there's this whole 90-10 rule that's out there. I don't subscribe to it. We at the Esselstyn Foundation don't subscribe to this concept of the 90-10 rule. But if you need it as a place to start, and if you think about what that actually means, is that 90% of your meals are plant-based, 10% have an animal product in it. And that means 2 meals a week are going to have an animal product in it, which is really not very much. So again, forever is scary. You're going to scare people away if you talk about, a lot of times people will go away to a conference and come home and they walk in the door and they say, that's it, we're never eating meat again, or we're never eating dairy products. Of course, that scares everybody in the house. So you want to start slowly, not scare anybody. Strategy number 4. AJ and I were talking about this. Consider having the erectile dysfunction conversation. According to Dr. Aaron Spitz, the most common reason a man may experience a problem having an erection is a problem with blood flow due to the narrowing of arteries. A whole food plant-based diet and regular exercise can prevent many of these diseases. So as we said, I think there's no such thing as a manly man who can't perform sexually. And so it's a hard conversation to have, but it's the right conversation to have. Erectile dysfunction is a real thing. I've got a lot of men out there that are suffering from it. And it may be, as we have discussed, the canary in the coal mine. And, you want to use your understanding of the male psyche to motivate the men in your life. And, the quote from the book is, a healthy heart equals healthy sex. And this guy literally wrote the book on penises. There he is, Aaron Spitz, the penis book. And he says that he's a plant-based diet guy. And he says that's a great way to make sure that you can achieve an erection for the rest of your life. Strong conversation. Strategy number 5, you want to leverage the need for autonomy. Men especially love this concept of autonomy. No man wants to be dependent on someone else. Autonomy is critical to the male psyche. No man wants to be a burden to his family. No man wants to be sick and weak. Men are twice as likely to have heart attacks compared to women. And so this is another great leverage tool if you're trying to get men to make healthier choices, is it's all about autonomy. I mean, I think I know a man that I can think of who doesn't fancy themselves somewhat autonomous, that they don't need other people. Now, of course, we know that's not true, but that fantasy, that male psyche kind of builds itself around that. And there's a lot of different reasons why. That's a whole separate conversation as to why that is, but I think it's true. Men like this notion of being their own men, as you might say. Strategy number 6, if you're trying to change anybody towards a more plant-based diet, keep things predictable. You want to avoid those freaky foods at first. You don't want to start off by saying, hey, I made this amazing quinoa white bean casserole you'll love. You want to stick to the known classics. This is exactly what Rip Esselstyn, my brother-in-law, did when he was converting the firefighters in Austin, Texas, who were notorious meat and dairy eaters, to try to transition their diets towards plant-based. He would make spinach lasagna, pasta with healthy pesto, veggie burgers with all the fixins, black bean burritos, just like Chipotle, lentil sloppy joes. He took kind of the male classics, if you will, and just made them, plant strongified them, as he says. So you really want to keep things predictable for the men in your life. Don't freak them out. Strategy number 7 is you want to leverage cost savings. There's a great misunderstanding and myth out there that plant-based eating is more expensive than eating meat. I just do not agree with that. We have a whole presentation with the Esselstyn Foundation called Plant-Based on a Budget, where we really dive into that whole concept of, is it actually more expensive to eat plant-based, which we do not think it is. Keep track of your monthly savings, maybe place money in a reward fund. Plant-based diets through research have shown to be 40% cheaper than diets that include animal products. So guys are cheap. Most guys I know are pretty cheap. They like to save money. So there you go. You got to leverage that as well. Strategy number 8, give them role models. Watch the movie Game Changers. AJ and I were just talking about that, but here are some of the people that are in the movie Game Changers. If you haven't seen this movie, if the men in your life have not seen this movie, it takes on erectile dysfunction. It takes a look at these plant-based bodybuilders and what they look like. This guy on the left, Nimal Delgado, has never had a piece of meat in his life. His parents were, I think, Hare Krishnas, and so he's never touched meat. The guy on the right, Patrick Baboumian, one of the strongest men in the world in terms of these strongman competitions. He is a devout vegan. He's a hardcore sort of animal rights vegan. I can't remember the guy in the middle's name, but he's in the movie as well. These guys are ripped, and they're all totally plant-based. Strategy number 9. We've been talking a lot at the Esselstyn Foundation about this thing called choice architecture. It's a whole separate presentation that we have. Choice architecture is an economic theory that refers to the practice of influencing choices that people make by organizing the context and the environment in which people make decisions. Choice architecture theory suggests that individual behavior can be influenced by small suggestions, context, environment, and positive reinforcements. You know, that's a lot of words to basically suggest that you can get people to make, this is really important, that you can get people to make good choices if you set up the environment in your home, for instance, to make it so that the easy choice is the right choice. Having cut up fruit in the refrigerator, all these things where you set people up for success. Having a batch cooking and having baby potatoes around that you can dip in walnut sauce in a second when you're hungry, instead of if you're coming in from work and you're hangry and you go right to the junky stuff. Things like that. Choice architecture is really fascinating in that it helps you. This is what's going to make people successful, is to set up their environment and create success. Having healthy foods prepped and ready to go makes the easiest choice the right choice, because humans are inherently lazy when they make choices, especially around food. Strategy number 10, last but not least, catch them doing the right thing. Positive reinforcement goes a long way. Statements like, I've noticed that you've been eating oatmeal for breakfast every day. Well done. You know, people love, even adults love to be caught doing the right thing. That really goes a long way. Wow, you've been really devouring the salads I've been making lately. Reinforce with them over and over again that they're making better choices, even if they're just tiny choices. Catch them doing the right thing. Thanks so much for going along with me, the Meatless Monday idea I proposed. These all work very, very well. But my final thoughts here. Knowledge alone does not drive behavior change. We know this. I mean, everybody on the planet knows what's healthy for them pretty much. We know that eating lots of fruits and vegetables is really, really good for you. But changing behavior is difficult. We are creatures of habit. We've got addictions. We love salt, sugar, and fat. There's a lot going on that keeps us from making better choices. Remember, there are a lot of outside forces out there that are working against men, especially and including social acceptance. So be empathetic, be ready to manage that with them. We must become choice architects for the men in our lives. Nudge, this is a book called Nudge, written by these guys, Thaler and Sunstein, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, and this economic theory. Environment matters. You want to create environments in which the easy choice is the right choice. That means, again, having food prepped and ready to go so that they will make that choice. But really, in the end, I want to close with this. And I don't know if many of you might not know this, but I also work in addiction and recovery. I'm working towards my social work degree. And so I'm currently doing an internship at an addiction and recovery center in downtown Cleveland. And we talk a lot in the addiction and recovery world about overcoming, hurdles and challenges and trying to avoid relapse. And a lot of what we talk about is finding what we call your why. Finding the reason in your life that's going to make sure that you make the right choice, that's going to set you up for success. And what I mean by that is finding something, a reason, so that when you're faced with what you want right now, meaning maybe it's junky food, versus what you want most, which is to live a long and healthy life, what's going to allow you to make that choice, make the right choice for what you want most and avoid that impulsive choice of what you want right now. And we talk about that a lot. And so what is your why? You know, a deep purpose or cause or belief that drives and motivates you, helps you escape the trap of what you think you want now versus what you want most. And it fully clarifies for you and others why you're doing what you're doing. And some examples of that are things like, I want to be active my whole life. I don't want to be a burden to my children. That's a big one for in my family. We really don't want to be like a lot of the people we've seen in our families spend the last 10 years of their lives in and out of the hospital, where they're a burden and they're on all kinds of medications and going through all these procedures. We want to be like Dr. Esselstyn and Anne, who are, 87 and 88 years old and living healthy, vibrant lives still, and with not taking any medications. Maybe you want to live a long life. Maybe you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, and that's going to motivate you. For someone like me, I hate falling prey to food industry lies. That's another motivator for me. I want to be around for my grandkids. I want to be able to be active, running around with them. I don't want to be the grandparent who sits in the chair and watches things happen. Maybe it's for the planet. Maybe it's because you love animals and that's why you want to do it. Maybe it's for God, for country, whatever it is. Finding your why will really help solidify for you, when you are tempted to make a poor choice. We want to help the men in our lives find their why. Maybe you just want to be your best self. So for those of you who maybe haven't seen this, there's a great video on YouTube. Jot this down. It's called Make Health Last. It's a minute-long video by the Canadian Heart and Stroke Foundation. Check this out. It's a minute-long video, and it's this interesting split screen where it sort of shows, a male who makes the right choices versus the wrong choices in their lives, and sort of it's really interesting to check out. So check out that video, Make Health Last. Show that to the men in your life. It's a male in the video. It's a man. And so it'll really help to kind of solidify some things. And that's the end of my presentation. So happy to take some questions and continue our discussion.
Well, thank you. This was certainly food for thought. And I know about that video you're talking about. Dr. Goldhammer shows it in all his presentations. Yeah. In one of them, he's fixing a tie, and one he's putting on an oxygen cannula. And it's
exactly.
It's really profound. I don't think people think that far into the future when they're doing bad habits today.
I know. I think as humans, we're terrible about weighing those types of long-term things. We're very much in the now and in the present and the immediate in general. And I think that's a tough thing. That's just maybe it's part of human nature, but which is, I know, a complex topic. What is human nature? But I think it's another thing we talk about in our presentation about choice architecture is we talk one of the examples that choice architecture theory has been applied to is we're saving for retirement. There's the numbers on the number of people who've saved for retirement in the United States is actually pretty small. It's pretty shocking. And again, it's a long-term thing, right? It's just like wanting to have long-term health. We don't think about it.
Yeah.
We think about spending now.
When you smoke, even you don't get lung cancer after the first cigarette or the 50th cigarette. It takes years, and
Right.
it's the same thing with the bad food. If people drop dead from a heart attack after eating a steak, they might think twice about it, but it takes years for coronary disease
Exactly.
to develop. Yeah. What do you think about the fake meats? Is that a good idea for to do for the people in your life at first as a transition, or is it better to just get them on whole foods right away, or does it just depend on the individual?
I think it's an excellent question. I mean, we have this love-hate relationship in our family, in our conversations we have with this whole sort of fake meat or these like Impossible burgers and all this stuff is it's a great step for the planet. We obviously want people getting away from animal agriculture. So we see that as a stepping stone. However, as you know, as well as I do, as Ann Esselstyn always says, read ingredients. What are the first 3 ingredients in Impossible burgers? It's going to be coconut oil, another type of oil, and some sort of, pea protein extract or something. It's not good stuff. It's not whole food. But again, if you need to use it as a transition piece to get somebody to move towards a plant-based diet, I mean, you got to do what you got to do, right?
Yeah.
Dr. Esselstyn is really opposed to these new meat alternative products because he has a lot of his patients, many of them who have terrible heart disease, who've had multiple strokes and bypasses and stents and everything like that. They start thinking that stuff's healthy and they get themselves into some serious trouble. So.
You know, when I was looking at your slides of like the woman in a bikini eating a hamburger, I haven't watched television in almost 5 years, which means I remember those commercials now that I think about it. And especially the one where like, it's just like dripping and it's
Yeah.
just, I mean, it's so gross to me, but like they do that the same thing to sell cars, they get these beautiful, I don't
I
know,
know
you know,
it's really sort of a sad commentary on men. I always get offended by it as a man because I'm thinking, come on, I'm not that much of a caveman. Like to just flash a beautiful woman and then flash a beautiful car and think that I'm going to think, wow, if I get that car, maybe she'll have sex with me. That's just crazy, But again, it's
That's so funny. So one of the viewers is saying, I'm constantly pushed to consume more protein because as I get older, I will lose all my muscle. Instagram is becoming so pushy, not listening to them.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, I mean, I've read a couple of reports about the need for higher protein amounts as you age, and that's an interesting one. But I think, again, people need to understand that if they eat a diverse plant-based diet, they're going to get as much protein as they need. The only time I ever think about protein supplementation is bodybuilders that I know who are plant-based will sometimes supplement with some plant-based proteins if they're really trying to build bulk. But your average person does not need to worry about protein amounts at all.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. Constantly being put, a lot of people are saying that's what they're told, that they need more protein, especially as they age. So Sherry says, could it be perhaps that some men in the vegan vegetarian populations are weaker and less masculine? Are there studies on that?
Great question. I mean, possibly, yeah. I mean, it's sort of, I mean, I'm certainly not a vision of pulchritude. I'm a runner, so I'm skinny, and maybe people.
Do you have your kids are boys or girls? I know
we have 2 girls and a boy.
2 girls in it. And is he all macho?
He is big and strong. He's a swimmer, so he lifts weights a lot for swimming. All of our kids are competitive collegiate swimmers, and so they all are big and strong.
Yeah. Susanna says, I have a friend whose husband was willing to eat her vegan dinners for 1 month for her milestone birthday. I always tell people that's what, like when it's your birthday or Mother's Day or anniversary, ask for that as a present, for them to go to some degree of vegan for some period of time.
Absolutely. Great idea.
It really is, because the thing is, I think most men are lazy and I think that if the woman just refuses to cook it and just say, hey, honey, you're welcome to buy it and cook it, they'll take the grill out a couple of nights and then they'll just eat the tofu.
Right. I totally agree with that too. I think we're all lazy. I mean, that's kind of one of the underlying principles of choice architecture is this notion that humans are lazy. We make something like 30,000 decisions a day or something. And we are, especially by the end of the day, we're exhausted. We don't want to have to think about what we're going to eat. And a lot of people, that's the big issue, is that they just don't want to have to think about it and put the effort in. I know I get that way sometimes. And that's a big piece of it. Make it, if the men in your life will just get tired if you say you're not going to cook another meal for them.
But most women are too agreeable that they won't do it.
Right.
That is what I see as the biggest problem, especially those that are struggling with food addictions or losing weight, whether it's meat or dairy or junk food, is that they're living in an unclean environment. And it's just hard on the person that's trying to get well.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's another aspect of choice architecture. Is one of the first rules of choice architecture. You want to get the bad choices away. And as you always say, if it's in your house, it's in your mouth. Mm-hmm. And that's a really hard thing. If you're cooking for different tastes and diets in your house and that stuff's around, it makes it really hard to say no.
Absolutely. Susanna says, my son is in the university right now at Rouxbe and is told that he needs to eat loads of meat to bulk up and they don't want to go against their coach. Any suggestions?
Oh, wow. I mean, you got to show them Game Changers. I mean, there are some amazing athletes in that movie. That just is a really uninformed person. It's sad, but that coach is really uninformed. But we saw a little bit of that with our kids in college with swimming. People had some concerns about their coach would say something like, "Oh, you need to eat more," things like that. But people are pretty enlightened these days to different types of diets for athletes. So that's it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually had a couple of coaches on the show that actually were the opposite, that inspired their players. This one, it was a tennis coach that inspired their players to actually not eat meat.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I think in terms of suggestions for that, I think that athlete has really got to, if they need to maybe do a little research online, find some articles, give them to the coach, try to enlighten the coach a little bit. But again, if they can get them to watch Game Changers, that's a.
It's so funny when people say, be strong as an ox. Oxes are vegan. Last time I checked, it's. I mean, how are these animals getting so big and strong on plants?
Right. I know. It's just, I always think of not eating meat as cutting out the middleman, right?
Yeah.
Like you're getting all the good stuff that those animals already eat, and then you get them through the animal. Why not just go right to the source?
Yeah. I wonder how much it really is about taste, Brian, because like when you think about it, if you take just meat and if you don't put the plants on it, the barbecue sauce, the ketchup, the mustard, the sugar, fat, and salt, most people don't just eat a piece of boiled chicken or a piece of boiled meat. They're,
Exactly.
and so, you wonder, is it really taste? Is it really?
Well, I think it's the saturated fat, quite frankly. I mean, really, in the end, that's what it's about. I mean, as we all know, we crave salt, sugar, and fat for specific reasons. They're concentrated calories. It's part of our survival instinct. And so some people are not willing to give up the pleasure of what that feels like, the dopamine hit, if you will. And again, like I said, I work in addiction and recovery. We talk about this all the time. Dopamine hits. I mean, that short-lived pleasure, where's it going to get you? You got to play out the tape. Now, we talk a lot about that, which is you got to think 5 steps forward. Okay, this might taste really good right now, or this drug might feel really good right now, but where's that going to put me 5 steps down the road? And like you said, we're not very good at thinking long-term.
Yeah, absolutely. Sherry has a question. She says, in the original Esselstyn study that showed amazing results in cardiac patients, did it include low-fat dairy?
That's a great question. I know when I first met the Esselstyns, when they first started, when I first met them, they were eating no fat sour cream and no fat yogurt early on. So this was in, let's see, this was in the mid 90s when I met them. And so, but that quickly, I think that really, Dr. Esselstyn really changed the more he learned about Colin Campbell's work and the use of casein and the fact that the protein in dairy was directly linked to cancer. So, but yeah, I think initially back in the day when they first started, they were going with a lot of food recommendations that they adjusted over time. I mean, even the oil thing, like Dr. Esselstyn talks about when he first, in 1985, went plant-based, they were still eating oil, and he just wasn't getting the results he wanted in his own cholesterol levels. And that's when he dropped oil. So I think it was a process for sure.
Wow. You know what I'd love to see, because the Campbell family is another first family of plant-based royalty. If they bring back the game show Family Feud, the Campbells versus the Esselstyns, that would be amazing. I would love to host that episode.
That would be hilarious with lots of plant-based questions. That would be hilarious.
Yeah, and then because a lot of the Esselstyns are very, very competitive. You like ripping.
Yeah, oh, very competitive. Very competitive.
Yeah.
When we do our immersions with Plant Strong Rips Company, when we do our health immersions out in Sedona, Arizona, and then in Asheville, North Carolina, we play plant-based Jeopardy, which is fun.
Oh, neat. That's so cool. Here's a good question from Deb. What do you say to people who think salmon is a health food for heart, brain, and anti-inflammation? Because it's not, eating fish isn't as associated with manliness, is it? The way meat is.
No, I wouldn't say, certainly not the way that like red meat and things that traditionally have. It's a great question. As we know, a lot of the blue zone diets, people in the blue zones, there's often some fish in their diets, and the Mediterranean diet often allows fish. But Dr. Esselstyn, as he always reminds us, the Mediterranean diet had a 25% chance of further cardiac events. So he always considers it a step in the right direction. But again, don't kid yourself. If you have a heart disease, especially advanced heart disease, which is the people that he works with, you don't want a 25% chance of another event. And that's what the Mediterranean diet has. And so something to say is that there's as much saturated fat in a piece of salmon as there is in a piece of steak. And it's important to remember that. there's no such thing as like, people often think, oh, well, fish is just better for you. Fish has some good stuff in it, but again, it's wrapped in a poor package. That's the way I always think of meat. It's got good stuff. It might have some good elements to it, but it's wrapped in a damaging package. And all that saturated fat especially is very concerning. So
Yeah.
that's what I would say.
Jay wants to know, how many years have you been plant-based now?
Great question. So I started, I was a marathon runner in my early 20s, and I wanted to get healthy. And I heard that there was some people like Dave Scott, who's a famous triathlete, were plant-based. And that's when I went plant-based. But again, I went through some really ugly years of plant-based, like a lot of chips and salsa, a lot of, I was eating a lot of dairy products at first. And so it's important to remember that I didn't really become truly whole food plant-based until I met Jane. And so Jane and I've been together for 25 years. So
wow, that's fantastic. All right, let's see. Tracy says, do you think you could convince a smoker to go vegan?
Oh, that's a great question too. Wow.
Not for health reasons.
Yeah, I mean, any step in the right direction is the step in the right direction. I think, I mean, for us, and I'm sure for you too, it's about health primarily, but if you do your research and you're an educated person, this is also about the planet. And this is also about sentient beings on the planet too. And so I think that if you really lay out a case for plant-based and look at global health, planetary health, watch the movie Cowspiracy. I mean, I don't understand how people can't go plant-based, quite frankly. I mean, even if they're smokers, smoking's got its issues for sure, but there are other things involved in going plant-based that are really important. And I know some people, especially in the recovery community, that are heavy smokers, but are good people who want to do the right thing. And I think that's something that I would, build a case for when talking to somebody. It doesn't matter if they smoke or not.
Yeah. Okay. I saw a question about it was something about, Jane says that you're the best cook in the house. What got you started?
Oh yeah. So as I mentioned before, I was an Outward Bound instructor, and a way to kind of find balance in my life was I would work in the field for a few months, and then I would cook in this whole food kitchen. I call it a whole food kitchen. They served meat. I didn't necessarily have to cook it because I was plant-based at the time, but they still served meat, but most of their stuff, it was heavily vegetarian. So that's where I learned how to cook. And then over time, just getting into the plant-based thing. And, when I first met Jane, she was not a great cook. It's so funny. Now she's the cookbook author, and I'm just the arm candy.
Yeah. We won't tell them this. Who's a better cook, Jane or Anne?
Oh.
Or is it 50-50? Is it real close?
I think it's real close. You're going to get me in trouble.
Okay. You don't have to answer, but I'm sure they're both fantastic.
I think Anne is really good at being inventive. Anne is like, she's unstoppable in the sense of, so they both have their strengths. So Anne really will, if she doesn't have a cucumber, she'll use a beet. Like, she'll just interchange ingredients and comes up with some really wild stuff. And I think Jane is probably a little bit better with like her sauces and her tastes. So Anne is brave. Jane is a little more scientific, maybe.
Essie doesn't do any cooking, does he?
He doesn't. He's really at a deficit when it comes to, like, when Anne and Jane are out of town, and sometimes I'll cook for him, but she'll always leave stuff for him. He's really not. We might say a victim of his generation, if that's a good way to say it, right?
But he can probably make his oatmeal, right?
Yes, he's very good at oatmeal. He's very good at making a bowl of cereal. But otherwise, he reheats a lot of stuff.
All right. So I can't find this question, but it was something. Oh, here it is from Tracy. What do you tell a person? They say they can't eat how you do because beans cause gas and they don't like tofu.
The bean thing, I know it's tough to get people to really believe this, but the bean thing goes away. I don't know about you, but I have no problems with legumes now. They don't cause any extra gas for me or bloating or anything. I know when some people first start going plant-based, they can have those issues. I always say try Beano, soak your beans overnight before you cook them, things like that help get rid of maybe some of the gas and the bloating, but it goes away. I don't have a problem with it at all anymore. My microbiome is now so used to eating beans and legumes and things. I don't know about you, but it just doesn't bother me at all.
Nice.
And in the words of Ann Esselstyn, people always say, "What about all the gas and the farting?" And she always says, "Just move around a lot."
That's fantastic. What's the best thing that Jane makes, and what's the best thing that Anne makes that you've eaten?
Oh, geez. Anne, let's see. Anne, my favorite Anne recipe is I think her twice baked potatoes. She does this great thing where she takes white potatoes, mixes them with sweet potatoes, carves them out of the shell or out of the skin, and then puts them back in and bakes them again, put some spices and things in that. I think that's in their new cookbook. That's my favorite of that. We make that a lot, like at holidays and things. It's twice baked potatoes, but it's got some sweet potatoes and white potatoes mixed together. And then Jane is a sauce master. That's really where we eat a lot of bowls at our house. We just pile a bunch of stuff in it. And of course, with a little bit of sauce, that's what makes the difference. She's gotten so good at making these great sauces. She's got, and dressings, like her 3-2-1 dressing is such a staple for us.
Would you ever bottle any of the sauces?
That's an excellent question too. We've actually had a few discussions at times with some co-packers to maybe think about wanting to do that. But getting into the world of trying to sell food products is pretty intense. It's really, I don't know. Have you ever thought about that?
I think food production, I don't know how Dylan Holmes does it unless you get a co-packer. I think it's really hard work.
It's really hard work. And I think the margins are really small and it can be really tough.
Yep. Here's a nice comment from Jennifer. She says, I made those potatoes for Thanksgiving. Those are great. You know, Deb is saying if we were truly carnivores, we would eat raw meat, because very few people eat meat without cooking it. Maybe some people eat sushi, but very few people eat steak tartare or raw chicken.
Oh, I know. Exactly.
Eat raw chicken. Yeah.
And of course, the whole teeth thing, which I'm sure you've had many guests on your program that have talked about this, but our teeth, some of the biggest evidence for the fact that we're not wholly carnivores is the fact that our teeth, look at our teeth. Our teeth are built for grinding things up, not ripping and tearing.
Absolutely. Paula says, does anyone else think your farts don't stink when eating clean? Mine don't. I mean, they really don't. I mean, I'm not just bragging. I mean, it's a fact.
Yeah. I don't seem to have a problem. Yeah.
That's funny. Here's a question from Jay. Do you miss living in Philadelphia versus Cleveland?
Oh, great question. Wow. I grew up in the suburbs of of Philadelphia. And, I've got some friends back there, but it's very similar to Cleveland. I mean, really the reason we moved to Cleveland was to be close to Ann and Essie when we were raising our kids, because we wanted the grandparents to be in their lives. And then when the house next door to them came up for sale and we were able to swing it, that we could have created our own little plant-based compound. So that's been a real bonus for us, but the suburbs are very similar. I mean, I grew up in the suburbs of Philly. We're in the suburbs here in east side of Cleveland. I certainly miss the sports teams. How about that? I mean, to be an Eagles and Phillies fan this year is really exciting. To be a Browns fan, though the Indians did okay, but to be a Browns fan, ugh.
I went to Penn. Maybe we were in Philly at the same time. Too bad.
You did?
Yeah, I was there from 1977. That's when I started college there. That's where I got introduced. It's so funny because I became vegan like the first day of college, so I never even got to try a cheesesteak.
Oh yeah, you never had one of the famous Pat's cheesesteak.
I went to Pat's cheesesteak, but then I was vegan. There was nothing to get, but I did try Anna's fried dough. That was this thing they would sell in Center City, and they would just like squeeze it and make these like donuts on this. Oh my God, so much junk food. Yeah,
so much junk food. Yeah.
Oh my God. So Jillian wants to know: Does plant-based improve our microbiome?
Absolutely. I mean, if you've read any of Robin Schutkin's work, Will Bolshevitz, all of that stuff talks about what does our microbiome want? Fiber, fiber, fiber. And where do you get fiber? You get it from plants. There is no fiber in meat. So a plant-based diet is the best thing you can do for your microbiome. You want to get all those microbes in there that eat all that fiber. They thrive off the fiber. And so absolutely, there's really no way to make a strong microbiome without putting a lot of fruits and veggies into the system.
And Robin was going to be on the show. I think it's next Tuesday. Yeah.
Awesome. We love Robin.
Yeah, the antiviral gut.
Jane's got her women's conference coming up in March, and Robin's one of the keynote speakers. Yeah,
Oh, nice.
Awesome. She just has a new book out, The Antiviral Gut.
Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about.
Excellent.
Sherry says, what is your best advice for how to lovingly include all your family members for holiday dinners, meat eaters and non-meat eaters?
Well, what we do in the Esselstyn gang is we just had, so this is very fresh in my mind. So we just had Thanksgiving out at the Knob, which is this house that the Esselstyns have, kind of a weekend home that's out in the country, if you will, that's been in the family for 3 generations now. And so we just had Thanksgiving out there. And so what we do is we supply all the stuff that makes Thanksgiving, and the sweet potatoes and the mashed potatoes and the cranberry salsa and the mushroom gravy and the potatoes and all this stuff. We just have this incredible layout. And then if somebody wants to bring meat, which they did, there was some cousins that wanted to bring some turkey. And so we let them do it. And they brought it, they cooked it themselves, they brought it, they had it. And most of the people didn't eat it. But again, let them, it makes them feel good, I think, also to be able to bring something. That's the way to do it. So then you don't get into any political battles over, we didn't serve any meat for you. You just have them bring it themselves.
Yeah. It's interesting how some people can't even go one meal without alcohol or meat, or it's so interesting because you talked about addiction. What do you mean you work in addiction? Like, do you counsel people or? Yeah.
So I'm in my last year of a part-time master's degree program to get my social work degree. And so I just kind of stumbled my way into working in the addiction and recovery world. So I work at a center in downtown Cleveland that is doesn't turn anybody away. So we have the socioeconomic status of most of the people in the program is pretty low. And so I'm one of the group leaders. So I run a group on Mondays and I observe a lot and do some individual counseling, but not much of that yet. Most of it is in the group setting. And so, but what's so fascinating about that is a lot of the language and a lot of the conversations actually are very similar to the ones that I have about food, because as we know, food is a drug. It stimulates many of the same areas, the pleasure centers of our brain, that drugs do. And so it's a very similar conversation. In fact, on Monday of this coming week, we're going to talk about how important social connections are in the recovery process. And so we can also say the same thing about, why people tune in to Chef AJ. They want community, they want to feel supported, and it's important to be connected to other people when you're trying to make positive lifestyle changes. So it's a lot of very similar themes.
In the recovery world in general, do they acknowledge food addiction as a thing, or do they poo-poo it, or?
It's really interesting because, as you can imagine, as I'm sure you know, smoking is so prevalent throughout the recovery world. And so I try to have conversations with people, and I actually do a presentation for the guys in this program about dopamine release, about the fact that food does it, sex does it, drugs do it, and that really what we all of us are dopamine fiends. Every one of us is addicted to something in some way, whether it's a sweet potato or whether it's a heroin. We like the hit of salt, sugar, and fat. And so our brains are wired to drive us toward these behaviors because they think it's the right thing to do. And so we talk a lot about that.
Yeah. Ivar's saying, what is the best nutrition argument against milk? And is milk considered manly too, part of the culture, or just?
Interesting. Milk, I don't think milk is necessarily part of the masculine thing that much. You don't see that much. You don't see a lot of, I guess they use a lot of athletes to advertise milk. The milk mustache for a while was a big thing. But the big thing about milk that you got to read the China study is the link between casein, which is the dominant protein in dairy products, and cancer production. I mean, Colin Campbell was able to be able to turn cancer genes on and off by simply giving these rats, casein. And so that's a huge one. I mean, if you really want to avoid cancer, or you've got cancer, you're a cancer survivor, you want to steer clear of dairy products. Then there's the whole saturated fat piece, which if you're talking about erectile dysfunction, heart disease, I mean, dairy, I sometimes wonder about that. I sometimes ponder if someone asked me, either give up meat or give up dairy, which one would you choose? I'm torn on that. I don't know. What do you think, AJ?
Oh gosh, I think dairy is more addictive, like just physiologically. And when you think about like if they gave up dairy, that would mean where's the cream in my coffee? Where's my ice cream? Where's my cheese? You know, so that might be harder for people. But
I know, like I think I could probably survive, and I could feel healthier, I think, if I was eating lean meat versus a lot of dairy products. I don't know. That's a funny question of trying to sort that out. If I had to make that choice, which one would I choose? Because dairy, the more I learn about dairy and its connection to acne and to asthma and to allergies and to early early periods for girls because of the hormones and everything, gosh, I would steer clear of dairy products.
You know, there's so many people that are, well, they say they're ethical vegetarians, but like, I don't think that's a thing because that is probably a just as cruel, if not a crueler industry, then that's all bad. But
oh, well, the reality of what happens to a dairy cow is horrible. If you're an ethical vegetarian, you really got to do your research on what happens to dairy cows and how really once they've been used to produce all these babies and then all this milk, essentially they're just, they're slaughtered like any other cow. I mean, it's the same with leather.
It's a miserable,
if you're wearing leather, I think it's a question to really ask yourself, because I'm guilty of having some leather products that before I really got into understanding the whole concept of animal rights and what was being done to animals. I have some leather shoes that I still have. I wonder about maybe getting rid of them. I don't know. Does that honor the animal to wear them?
You could donate them because to a shelter or, Goodwill or something like that,
Yep.
This has just been a really fascinating and scintillating conversation. If people want to find out more about your work with the Esselstyn Foundation or book you as a speaker or make a donation, I have the link in the chat in the show note. But is there any other way to follow you? Do you have a social media presence?
Well, Esselstyn Foundation has an Instagram and we're on Facebook as well, but that's really just a replication of our Instagram site. So if you go to our website, you can sign up for our newsletter. We do a once a week email blast of just general information about a variety of different things, whole food, plant-based. If you are involved with an organization that's a nonprofit, and that could be everything from a plant-based pod to a group of Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts or any sort of affiliated group that's a nonprofit, and you would like to bring some of this plant-based information, we pride ourselves on doing our presentations live and making sure we're there for questions and answers. It's not pre-recorded stuff. We would be happy to work with your organization. So just reach out to us through the Esselstyn Foundation website and get it comes right to my inbox if you just type in a message there, and we'd be happy to work with you. So let us know.
That's fantastic. Thank you. It's just such a joy getting to know you. What are you making for dinner tonight, or what has Jane made?
Oh, Jane's still out doing her discussion. We haven't even talked about it, but our daughter went to visit her boyfriend this weekend. He's still in college. And so it's one of those nights where it's just the two of us, which means we'll probably just do the beans, greens, and maybe, I think we've got some quinoa. We love quinoa. So we've got some quinoa in the refrigerator. We'll probably just do a reheat and with a little bit of maybe drizzle of tahini sauce. How about that?
I'm just, I sent a huge box of vinegars to be shared by Jane and Ann. I wish they had done an unboxing. I'm curious who got what flavors.
I know we have the hot fire one. That's really good.
The blazing habanero.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Because you're going to get 2 more bottles just for being on the show. So you get to pick.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for such a wonderful presentation.
All right, Jane just came in the door. Jane, you want to say hi? Yeah.
That's so funny. I knew if I kept Chef long enough, they'd come home.
Absolutely. Here she comes.
Hi.
Your husband's so interesting.
Isn't he a love? I know.
He's so great. I got to know so much about him.
Well, I'm so glad. And we just pulled in. My mom and I were doing did you tell them?
Yep.
We were at a bookstore. So, oh, God, sorry, the dog is attacking me. Here's Fraser.
Oh, I can barely see him. What kind is he?
A black lab. He's a black lab.
Oh, he's so cute.
No, we were just at be a plant-based woman warrior, live fierce, stay bold, eat delicious, just like AJ
Oh.
presentation. And I was so bummed. I'm like, Brian, he didn't tell me the time of his presentation. So we missed. But anyway, how'd it go?
Great. It was
I
great.
think you did a great job. I think you
Oh,
should
was it
watch it.
presentation? Was it a conversation?
Well, I did Men and Meat, and then we had a great conversation. AJ asked excellent questions.
Yeah, I think
Yes,
it was
that's what
wonderful.
she's all about.
Are there any more hidden Esselstyns or, that I could be having on the show?
How funny. You know what? There are.
Well, I'd love to meet them and I'd love to have them all on. Like one
Well,
of
if you ever want to talk like
Dr. Ann Bingham would be great. She's an OBGYN. She's
Dr. Ann Bingham,
plant-based,
she's Ted's wife. You
Ted with the
interviewed
wood.
Ted and Zeb, right?
Yep, they came on about their furniture business. Yeah, and I tried to write them, but they never wrote back. They never even got their free vinegar. They never answered.
Oh,
Well, I'm going to see them this weekend. I'll tell them to hup.
yeah.
I mean, it's still available, but yeah, they did the show and they never responded to their free vinegar
Well,
email.
sometimes
So
it comes not from you. It comes from a different person. So
it comes from me. I just copy Thomas on it. So, but that's okay. But yeah, I'd love to have any of the hidden Esselstyns. We'd love to.
We'll
talk to them.
unfold and unfold.
I'll ask our daughter. Our daughter Kryle, our oldest daughter, who's now out of college. She might be an interesting, because she's had to navigate this as a child and then through college and all that stuff. I think that's an interesting topic. I haven't really thought all the way through, but anyway,
Yeah, and she was a division. We have 3 kids. They're all swimmers, and she just graduated, so we can talk about her like in the past tense of her swimming career. And she, with the 4 years of college, one of which was COVID, so really 3 years, she has like 28 national titles, and she's won, like in her last year, won 6 of her 7 events at national NCAAs. And her Kenyon College won nationals, Division 3.
That's incredible, boy.
Yeah, so she's
And
got
on
some
a plant-based,
badassery. She's got some badassery, and she's my publicist.
and on a plant-based diet. Yeah, people
And
are
a
saying, Valeria is saying, yes, Kryle is so cool. We'd love to have her on Chef AJ. Well, let me know.
Okay.
Nice to see you, Jane.
All right.
Good to see you.
Congratulations.
I can't wait to hear more from Brian.
We
Yeah.
promoted your book even though you weren't here, so don't worry.
Oh, thank you. I tried to dress in the colors of our book today.
Oh, beautiful.
All right.
Well,
Hey, good to
thanks.
see you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Brian. It was just
all right,
great.
AJ,
meeting
it was
you.
an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow. My show is at 9 a.m. and my guest is Dr. Joel Furman.